Welcome, everyone, to the first session of Organization Design in Focus, a new LinkedIn Live series from the European Organizational Design Forum. The purpose of this series is to bring together leading practitioners and researchers to explore ideas, challenges, and opportunities shaping the future of organizations. Today's topic is job crafting and workplace innovation, redesigning work for adaptability, performance, and well-being. I'm delighted to be joined by Professor Colin Lindsay from the University of Strathclyde Business School. Colin is a professor and head of department of the Work, Employment and Organisation Department at Strathclyde. Over the past 25 years, his work has focused on workplace innovation, employability, leadership, workforce capability, and organizational change. As organizations continue to navigate technological disruption, workforce transformation, and changing expectations of work, questions about how work is designed have become increasingly important. These are the themes that we'll explore today. Colin, welcome, and thank you for joining us. Hello, Colin.
Hi, great to be here, Andrew.
Thank you, Colin. It's lovely to be here with you. And before we get to the focus of our discussion on job crafting and workplace innovation, can you tell us briefly about your role and what you do?
Yeah, I'll be very brief. I'm a professor and researcher here at Strathclyde Business School in the Department of Work, Employment and Organisation. And I guess my job involves two key components. Half of my time, I'm out in the world working with businesses, engaging with business leaders, their team leaders and employees, to try and think about how we can promote what we would call fair work. That's improved job quality, but also workplace innovation. So the kind of workplaces that provide great jobs for people and empower those people to drive innovation and productivity. So I've spent the last 20, 25 years working hand to hand with businesses to try and achieve those positive outcomes and deliver cutting edge research that will help businesses to make strong decisions around workplace innovation. The other half of my time is spent here at Strathclyde working with our MBA students and our other master's students in human resource management and work organisation to try and help them learn about how they might use the experience of business to shape their own future management practice.
Excellent. Thank you. So let's focus on understanding job crafting. This may be a concept that may be new to some of our listeners. Job crafting has become an increasingly important concept in discussions about the future of work. How would you explain job crafting, and why does it matter for both employees and for organizations?
Okay, so put simply, job crafting can be seen as a specific form of proactive behavior that is deployed by employees. I'm going to use a little bit of jargon here, but actually it's very simple. When we think about that proactive behavior, it involves employees initiating changes to what we would call job demands and job resources. I'm going to explain what I mean by that in a second. But the idea is that job crafting is when employees take the initiative to make changes to their job to make that job more meaningful, engaging, satisfying, and hopefully promoting well-being and productivity in the workplace as a result. Just to elaborate a little bit on that, I use this jargon of job demands and job resources. So what do we mean by that? Job crafting comes, or certainly the way that we work with job crafting, comes from an area of work psychology theory called job demands resources theory. And as I was saying, apologies for the jargon, but in fact, it's very simple. Basically, what we're trying to work out here is, why are some people really productive and engaged in the workplace, while other people struggle to be productive and engaged and actually burn out because they're under too much pressure in the workplace? And we argue that the answer to that question lies in people's job demands and job resources. What do we mean by that? Well, job demands are just those bits of your job, the aspects of your job that strain you, that take effort, whether it's psychological or social or organizational. So it might be having a lot of work to do, too much work to do, having too many KPIs and targets to try to hit, having really demanding customers or colleagues, having to deliver emotional labor like we're doing right now by presenting ourselves in a certain way. All of these things are job demands. They're stuff that take energy in your job. And that's not a bad thing, because if we had completely undemanding jobs, we'd be disengaged and really bored. But if job demands become excessive, too much work, not enough time, too many KPIs, too many people pulling us in different directions, if job demands become excessive, people are more likely to burn out and less likely to be productive in the workplace. Okay, is everybody okay so far? I hope so. So if we want to manage people's job demands, we could go hire ourselves another 100 workers, and then the demands on each of our workers will reduce. But if we don't have the resources to do that, the money to do that, we can instead invest in people's job resources. So what do we mean by job resources? We mean those aspects of your job that help you get the job done, and those aspects of your job that you find engaging and fulfilling. And that could be things like having really great feedback from your boss or your team that help you develop as a person. A very important job resource might be having the autonomy to do the job well, to actually control your work. Another job resource is feeling supported by your team and by your line manager. Another job resource might be having the opportunity to learn and develop. So what we've seen from research is that if we invest in people's job resources, it helps them manage really demanding jobs, having a lot of work, having a lot of KPIs, having demanding customers. They're less likely to burn out, and they're more likely to be productive in the workplace. Okay, so the question then becomes, what happens when people feel they have excessive job demands and not sufficient job resources? Job resources being the feedback and autonomy and learning and development opportunities that we just discussed. Well, the leaders on this call can say, well, I'll do it all myself. I'll invest in my people's job resources so that they've got better jobs and they're more productive and engaged in the workplace. What job crafting argues is that there's another way. That way is to empower people to craft improvements to their own job from the bottom up. So rather than managers doing it for people, helping them manage their job demands and job resources, we empower people to make small but potentially crucial changes, to craft changes to their job on the front line. And we hope that that will then lead to better engagement, a reduced burnout risk, better well-being, and improved performance. And indeed, when we look at the evidence, there's a substantial evidence base to suggest that job crafting can make a real difference in all of these potentially really important outcomes.
Excellent. Well, Colin, that's really interesting. And the way you've described job crafting, you describe job crafting as a proactive behavior from employees. Does that mean that if leaders want to benefit from employees' job crafting, they should hire proactive people? Or can we teach people to do job crafting?
I would argue, Andrew, a bit of both. So job crafting is a form of proactive behavior. So there are two groups of people who probably do job crafting a lot. One group is people who are naturally proactive, and you can certainly identify that during the hiring process and hire people who are more likely to be proactive in crafting improvements to their jobs. That's fine. The other group of people who have always had access to job crafting and do job crafting a lot are people like you and me. People who have great jobs because we're both university lecturers and we both have considerable autonomy to make changes and to choose things that we do in the workplace. That's why here this evening, I'm enjoying having a conversation with you rather than doing something less interesting instead. I have the autonomy to craft stuff in the workplace that I really enjoy doing and find meaning in. You're quite right to say, though, what happens in terms of job crafting if only people who are naturally proactive or only people like you and me who have a lot of autonomy get to job craft? Well, we would argue, yeah, you can hire people who are more likely to craft, but you can also learn how to do job crafting. There have been a number of interesting intervention experiments where essentially managers and teams have learned how to do job crafting. And we know that that can have a positive impact both on people's awareness of job crafting and their ability to deliver job crafting, and in the positive outcomes that we've already talked about in terms of higher engagement, better well-being, and better performance in the workplace. Maybe I can elaborate that on that a little bit. A good way to think about it is the different components that go into job crafting. So I've talked about how it's about proactively making changes to your job in terms of the balance of job demands and job resources. But how would we actually go about doing that? Well, we argue that people who engage in job crafting and reap the benefits of job crafting do three kind of things, areas of activity that go into a job crafting outcome. The first one we might call crafting for job resources. Now, remember, we talked earlier about how job resources are those parts of your job that you find motivating and help you get the job done and help you be engaged in the workplace. So people who are crafting for job resources are proactively seeking out opportunities to learn, more or different feedback from different people within the workplace, more support from their team. Might even be just having the right equipment and kit to do the job well. So one form of job crafting is, rather than waiting for your boss to deliver the support, the feedback, the autonomy that you need to do the job well, you proactively seek out those resources for yourself. That's job crafting part one. Job crafting part two, it's about, we call crafting for challenge. I said earlier that really undemanding jobs disengage people. So very often employees will feel that they're not sufficiently challenged. Job crafting for challenge is basically saying, can you proactively seek out opportunities to do more, to step up, to shadow your boss, to work at a slightly higher level, to learn new things that challenge you, but that grow you as a person. So that's job crafting part two. And then job crafting part three, we call optimizing job demands. So we talked about job demands as being those things that create pressure and can potentially burn you out. Too much work, not enough time, too many customers making demands of us, too many people within the workplace making demands of us. Optimizing demands is basically saying, do people proactively seek out small efficiencies, a workaround, a way of doing a swap with one of your employees so that you make small changes autonomously in the workplace that help you optimize some of those things that really burn you out and irritate you, optimizing demands. So, okay, we have our three forms of job crafting. Crafting for resources, more feedback, better feedback, different learning opportunities. Crafting for challenge, can I step up and proactively take on more responsibility, but work that grows me as a person? And optimization, that stuff that really bugs me and is creating pressure, can I find ways and efficiencies to try and optimize that and remove some of those demands from my job? Okay, as we've already discussed, proactive people might seek those forms of job crafting themselves. But we have seen in the work that we do, and we've worked with many, many businesses, that if we work with people to think about their jobs and think about how they might engage in these three job crafting activities, we can actually teach people to craft more effectively. The other crucial area of learning is teaching and empowering line managers to support their people and to create the opportunity for people to take ownership of their job and to craft improvements and changes from the bottom up. Can we teach it? We do teach it. I spend a lot of my time doing workshops with companies. My own team is doing a very large randomized control trial of job crafting teaching and job crafting training. It's called a project called Wishes, wishes.uk.com, if anybody would like to hear more information about that project. So we think you can teach it, and we think it would make a big difference if line managers and employees did more work around job crafting.
Excellent. Well, Colin, thank you for sharing those three types of job crafting. And it sounds like a fascinating project you're working on. And perhaps we could write the kind of link to your project in the chat there. But your work, it's explored workplace innovation for many, many years. What distinguishes an innovative workplace from an organization that's simply introducing new technology or new processes?
Well, I think, obviously, I'm a workplace person. I lead a department of work, employment, and organization. So one of the things that I think is most important is how jobs are designed and workplaces are built. There's lots of ways to drive innovation through technology and the rise of AI. But what we've seen in our research over many years is that there are things that we can do as leaders managing workplaces that make a huge difference. Very often those things are to do, again, with people's jobs. In fact, I often say to business leaders that I work with that certainly if you're on the people and organization side of the business, the single most important thing that you can do to drive innovation is invest in really brilliant jobs and or empower people to craft brilliant jobs from the bottom up. And I think I can prove that. I think we can demonstrate that with evidence. You talked about innovative businesses. One of the concepts that we use a lot in our research is the idea of innovative work behaviors. What does that mean? Well, we would argue that while there's lots of ways to drive innovation, and in some businesses, all of the innovation is driven by tech investment, and actually many people don't get the opportunity to innovate much at all. But our argument would be those are the exceptions. If you look at the most innovative businesses around the world, businesses that innovate a lot tend to have a lot of people innovating in those businesses. So people at different levels and different roles across different business functions are involved in the innovative process and exhibit these innovative work behaviors. What do I mean by innovative work behaviors? I mean, there are employees in businesses who first generate ideas to take the business forward and drive innovation, but then anyone can have an idea. Innovative work behaviors also involves people being committed to getting that idea heard, go to their boss, make a point of asking for feedback on that idea, and then committing to the implementation of it to drive the innovation forward and be part of the change. Those are what we would call innovative work behaviors. And as I was saying, I think there's strong evidence that businesses that innovate a lot have lots of people innovating and exhibiting these innovative work behaviors. Why is that important? Because we have lots of evidence that suggests what we've just been talking about might be important in eliciting these innovative work behaviors, where businesses invest in people's job quality, where they give their employees strong autonomy, where they empower people to craft changes, maybe even very small changes in their job from the bottom up. Those sort of businesses tend to have a lot of people exhibiting innovative work behaviors, and we think that really matters for broader innovation performance.
Well, thank you, Colin. And I think perhaps you could expand. You've talked about the importance of that bottom-up innovation, but I know dynamic capabilities is another concept that you use to research organizational innovation. And for the uninitiated, what are dynamic capabilities, and how does this idea link with your research and just really driving workplace innovation at a practical level?
So colleagues may or may not be aware of this concept of dynamic capabilities. This was an idea that was popularized, or a concept that was popularized by David Thies and his colleagues in the 1990s. And Thies and everyone who's been involved in dynamic capabilities research, like me, ever since, these people were interested in why some businesses faced with crisis, and it seems like there's permanent crisis right now, but why are some businesses, when faced with crisis, able to innovate, pivot, and drive change and survive and thrive through crisis? Thies and his colleagues first looked at businesses managing globalization in the mid-1990s to try and answer that question. And as I was saying, dynamic capabilities make a lot of sense right now because we are constantly trying to thrive and innovate our way out of crisis. What Thies and his colleagues and what various other people, including me, have found ever since is that businesses that are able to thrive and innovate their way out of crisis have what we might call dynamic capabilities. Now, all businesses have ordinary capabilities. They have their plant, they have their stock, they have their supply chains, they have their customer base, they have their brand. All businesses have those capabilities that they can leverage these assets through. Dynamic capabilities, we have discovered, are based in businesses where the business has great sensing capacity. So to what extent is the business able to sense, identify opportunities and threats, new markets, the death of a market, new opposition and new competitors, new technologies that can be leveraged in order to drive the business forward? So sensing is a dynamic capability. So is seizing. So when a business identifies an opportunity or threat, to what extent is it able to reskill its people or redeploy its people or break new markets or develop new products in response to change? And then lastly, we might talk about reconfiguration or transformation. So we saw a lot of this during COVID, where businesses had to fundamentally redevelop their business model and reconfigure their business model to do something completely different. Sensing, seizing, reconfiguration, and transformation. These are dynamic capabilities. And as I was saying, We have strong evidence that businesses that are able to thrive and innovate their way out of crisis have these capabilities. Why am I interested in this as someone who's interested in work organization and people management? Because we've done a lot of research on the kind of people management and workplace practices that seem to be associated with dynamic capabilities in businesses. So for instance, as part of a project called Made Smarter Interact, which we led part of here at the University of Strathclyde, we worked with more than 300 manufacturing leaders to try and work out which manufacturing businesses, and manufacturing here in the UK constantly faces tremendous pressure in terms of cost and crisis. So what kind of manufacturing businesses are more likely to have these dynamic capabilities, and what kind of work organization and people management practices do they have? And you'll be unsurprised to hear that I'm going to rotate back to the kind of practices that we think are really important for driving innovation in the workplace. When we worked with those 300 manufacturing businesses, the businesses that exhibited strong dynamic capabilities also had workplace practices that focused on collaboration, self-organization in teams, workplace innovation and autonomy, and indeed job crafting in order to help people drive innovation and get the job done. So this is another set of concepts that we think might be interesting for businesses that are trying to innovate their way out of crisis and drive their business forward.
Excellent. And you mentioned COVID-19 and the impact on business and innovating out of crisis. This year's European Organization Design Forum conference, one of the key themes is human-centered performance. And one could argue that organizations often see performance and well-being as competing priorities. So from your research, how can organizations design work that could support both?
I mean, obviously, I would strongly push back against the idea that investing in well-being and driving organizational performance are in any way in competition. Businesses that have strong workplace well-being strategies and investments tend to perform extremely well in terms of both productivity and innovation. But let's actually, to frame it a different way, let's go back to those concepts that we discussed right at the beginning of our conversation: job demands and job resources. I said that job crafting, it comes from the world of a thing called job demands resources theory. And that theory and that initial work from maybe 25 or 30 years ago was really interested in employee well-being. The question that was being asked is, as I was saying, why do some employees thrive and perform in the workplace while others burn out, or are more likely to burn out, become unwell, and maybe go absent in the workplace? And as I was mentioning, we discovered, or researchers discovered, that it's about balancing people's job demands and job resources. If you have excessive job demands, you're more likely to get ill and burn out and become exhausted. If we invest in people's job resources, we're more likely to mitigate the risk of people burning out. Here's the cool bit though. How does that actually happen? What's the process by which investing in something like feedback or learning opportunities or feeling supported by your team, what's the process by which we protect people against burnout? And the answer to that is around people's engagement in the workplace. There's some rather poor work that's been done on employee engagement and some dubious surveys that are out there on the market on employee engagement, but we actually have some really robust and validated measures of what we might call work engagement. Work engagement is an effective motivational state of work-related well-being. So it's basically saying that you've got the kind of job that makes you feel energized inside, that makes you feel absorbed in your work, like the kind of great jobs that we have where the whole of the day will pass by because we're so wrapped up in all the interesting things that we have to do, and that you find meaning and purpose in. So that's work engagement. And that's a state of well-being in the workplace. And we know when we invest in people's job resources and balance people's job demands, they're more likely to be engaged. A sense of invigoration and energy, a sense of meaning and dedication, and a sense of absorption. And that can protect people against burnout risks. Here's a good bit. We also know that engaged employees are more innovative, to go back to my concept of innovative work behavior, and can be more productive in the workplace. Invest in brilliant jobs. Invest in people's job resources. You'll protect your people from burning out, and you'll create the space for them to drive innovation in your business. The two are not in opposition. In fact, they complement each other extremely effectively.
Thank you, Colin. And it sounds like you're making a convincing argument to move beyond the employee engagement survey and to focus on work. You've really highlighting the importance of resources. One resource is technology, and thinking about the future of work. There's a lot of talk about artificial intelligence, digital technologies. They're continuing to reshape organizations. What implications do you see for job design, for workforce capability, for the quality of work? AI is a hot topic, another theme we'll explore at this year's conference. What are your views?
My views are that we don't really know, because I think many businesses are at the beginning of their AI journey, and that there's no doubt that AI has incredible transformational potential, both positive and negative, in workplaces. I'm going to lean towards a positive, though. It's a lovely sunny day here in Glasgow, where I'm working, and I'm going to argue for the potential benefits for job quality. And actually, I was speaking earlier about this big manufacturing project that my colleagues, led by my colleague Jill McBride here at Strathclyde Business School. So we've spent a heap of time working for this Made Smarter Interact project, trying to work out what the future of work in manufacturing might look like. And of course, AI is a big part of that story. And I think many of the manufacturing businesses that we work with view AI as a tool for augmentation and task elimination rather than job destruction. And that isn't to say that there will be job losses. Of course, some jobs will disappear as a result of the AI revolution. But many of the businesses that we're working with are thinking about how AI might augment and support the work of their people, and to try and help people to do the higher value added tasks that can drive innovation in the business. So it's exactly the kind of job crafting and innovative work behaviors that we've already talked about. And if you think about the potential of AI in that space, it can connect people up much more effectively. It can provide real-time, brilliant data to help people make better decisions in a more agile way in the workplace. It can help people learn more effectively. It can create more inclusive workplaces. So I think, maybe, as I was saying, maybe just because it's a sunny day here in Glasgow, I feel pretty optimistic about the potential for AI, but I'm also apprehensive because we're at the beginning of a long journey of change.
Excellent. And thank you again for joining us on a sunny day in Glasgow towards the end of your workday. And as we kind of come to the kind of half-hour point in our live session, and we'll see if there's kind of any questions, comments from our audience. What advice do you have for practitioners, for organization design practitioners, for leaders and organizations that are joining us today? What practical steps would you recommend for creating more engaging and more innovative workplaces?
So again, I'll come back to my mantra, something that obsesses me, which is the idea that one of the most important responsibilities of any leader in any business, and one of the most productive things a leader can do in any business, is build really great jobs for their people and create the spaces and opportunities for people to improve their jobs and to craft improvements to their job from the bottom up. So we've already talked about the potential benefits of job crafting, but there's a much broader evidence base that says investing in people's job quality, their jobs, is really good for productivity and performance in businesses. So think about how your people can work autonomously. Think about empowering your people to drive change. Think about distributing leadership. That's another concept that's very connected to dynamic capabilities. Dynamically capable and agile businesses tend to have people who engage in leadership behavior in lots of different spaces and lots of different parts of the business. So think about how your business does leadership. Does it empower people to lead at the appropriate level, or does decisions come from the top down? Because that's not going to create the agile business that you want. So those would be the kind of investments that I would argue for, in terms of investments in people's jobs and capabilities around leadership to help drive innovation in your business. The other thing that I would strongly encourage business leaders to do is to engage with us. Here in the higher education sector, in the research sector, we are always hugely enthusiastic to work with businesses, to learn from businesses, and hopefully to bring some of these concepts to life. And as I was saying, I'm part of a project at the moment called Wishes, wishes.uk.com, which provides free training to businesses on empowering their people to engage in job crafting. So there's lots of free stuff out there from the university sector, because we want to learn from you, and hopefully the concepts and research that we do might be useful in your business.
Excellent. Thank you, Colin. And you kind of touched on there the role of leaders and what role they can play in creating an environment where people can improve their work. And where should leadership lie in businesses that are trying to innovate?
As I was saying, if we go back to this dynamic capabilities literature, what kind of leadership structures and practices create the opportunity for people to share ideas, solve problems together, and drive innovation in businesses? And as I was saying, this concept of distributed leadership seems to be really important here. So where should leadership lie? It certainly shouldn't all come from the top down. And I'm afraid in many businesses, it still does. It's still a very hierarchical approach to leadership, nor should it be rooted in the kind of traits or assumed skills and talents of a small cadre of leaders at the top of the business. We would argue for an approach to leadership that is distributed, so that people in lots of different spaces in the business are able to engage and involve themselves in leadership behaviors and leadership action. And we would also argue, and this is very much how distributed leadership functions, distributed leadership is about practice. So it's not about the behavior or the supposed skills and talents of a small cadre of people at the top. It's about embedding the opportunity and to some extent the responsibility to lead in lots of different spaces in teams within your business. So when I work with businesses on distributed leadership, here are some of the questions that I ask. And the reason I ask these questions is that we have good research to suggest that how you answer these questions matters for people leading and driving innovation in your business. So when it comes to goal setting, does that come from the top down, or do people in different parts of the business feel involved and have a voice in the setting of goals for their team? When it comes to creating opportunities for learning and how learning and development works in the business, are people at different levels in the business involved in leading that activity and sharing ideas together? When we have decision-making forums in the business, are there opportunities for people at less senior parts of the business to have voice and to feel that they can be part of the leadership decision-making process? These are what we might call distributed leadership practices. And there's a strong evidence base to suggest that businesses that invest in those kind of practices are able to harness the innovative potential of their employees. And one thing I'll say as we come towards perhaps the end of our discussion is that I can imagine there are business leaders out there who are saying, this sounds incredibly risky if there's people who think they're leaders all over my business and are crafting their own job without reference to what the business is actually trying to achieve. A huge part of our work with businesses is to try and deploy these concepts in context and while managing risk. Of course, people can't just be allowed to go and craft their job and say, I want to optimize the things that I don't want to do, which someone else can then pick up. Nor is it safe or appropriate for people at different levels of the business to have the same level of voice and authority in leadership decision making. We still have to have clear lines of accountability and responsibility in businesses. But that's kind of the whole point. The point is to think about how these concepts might land in your business, how they might create the opportunity to drive innovation in your business, and then how we manage that process collaboratively in order to manage the risk and empower our people.
And I believe that may touch on, Benedict has kind of a comment in the chat there, and thank you, Matt, also for putting in the wishes link there so we can explore that project. Benedict highlights the organizations I work with talk about and also believe that culture and performance will create an unstoppable force, if you will. I think what you're describing is perhaps a a culture, Colin? Could you expand on that, the importance of organizational culture and how that fits in with performance?
Sure. I mean, I'll be honest. When I work with businesses, I don't tend to use the term organizational culture much. And that isn't to say I don't believe in the importance of organizational culture, but I think culture grows out of norms and practices. I often use when I work with businesses, I say I'm going to use a technical term. That term is stuff. So I think a really positive and innovative culture in businesses emerges from the embeddedness of certain norms and practices and ways of working where people feel psychologically safe and empowered to drive innovation and change. So that then becomes a culture of a business, but that culture can't survive if we don't embed ways of working and practices that create the opportunity for people to drive innovation and change. You and I, Andrew, are both people who've done a lot of research in HR and in the workplace. And you and I both know that there's yet another bit of jargon that we talk about, which is AOM. So in the world of HRM, we often say people will perform for your business where they have the ability, the opportunity, and the motivation to do so. And all of those are important. If we want to drive innovation in businesses, we've got to hire the right people with the right skill set, and we've got to skill those people up effectively. So that's the ability bit. We've got to create the right incentives and rewards for people. That's the motivation bit and the engagement bit. As I often say to businesses, though, I'm an O guy, because I think one of the big challenges that we face in a lot of the businesses I work with is that people don't have the opportunity to engage in leadership or to drive change or to engage in these innovative work behaviors where they have the opportunity to get their idea heard and actioned in the business. So what I'm trying to do with projects like Wishes is create learning opportunities where business leaders create opportunity sets for employees to do more in a really positive way that's going to engage them and help drive innovation. And I think that's a crucial route to a positive and innovative organizational culture.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Colin. And if there's anyone who's listening now, if you have any questions, comments, we're now coming towards the end of our live session. I'll give people a moment to perhaps write in the chat. As an opportunity guy, we don't want to hold you back from the opportunity from the sunny day in Glasgow, but we'll just give people just a quick moment, if you'll bear with us, Colin, to see if there's any more questions from those joining us. For those of you who are listening, thank you very much for joining today. This is our first live session of the Organization Design in Focus from the European Organization Design Forum. Okay, well, at this stage, I don't see any more questions or comments, so I'd like to thank you very much, Colin, for being with us. Thank you for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure to chat with you. I know, Colin, if you'd like to perhaps tell us how people may be able to get in touch with you to continue to learn about your research.
Yeah, if you can find us on LinkedIn, you can find the Department of Work, Employment and Organisation in LinkedIn. You can find Strathclyde Business School, and you can find me on LinkedIn. I'm very happy to connect colleagues to any of the projects or ideas that we've just been discussing. It is a sunny day here in Glasgow, and as you know, Andrew, it's always a sunny day in Glasgow. And thanks very much for the invitation to chat with you. I've really enjoyed it.
Thank you, Colin. Really appreciate it. And thank you, everyone, for listening. Take care and bye for now.